Chapter 384. Fist and palm movements changed, it could be said to be dazzling. Legs followed closely, fists and kicks generated wind, even if a layman looked at it, there would be murderous intent everywhere. Swaying, or lifting, or covering, or leading, or slapping, so on. Arms were like snakes, full of strength, legs were like whips, but the power was like a staff, fierce and overbearing. There were no weapons in their hands, but they were able to turn every part of their body into a weapon. Knees, elbows, feet, hands, they were especially prominent, and the places they attacked were also the opponent's weak points: head, neck, heart, and genitals. Fists hit flesh, there seemed to be a sound. Bystanders who heard it felt painful, but the two people on the field seemed to be fighting more and more fiercely, their faces not showing the slightest bit of pain. Insiders could see that Jin Qinhuang Li Hongyuan leaned towards skillful strength, and little overlord He Zhihai leaned towards strength. In terms of the age of the two, this point was just the opposite. It could only be said that He Zhihai had an innate advantage in terms of physique. He Zhihai was at the border all year round, and in all likelihood, he had participated in large and small battles, so his awareness was definitely better. However, once again, it was unexpected that Jin Qinhuang, this noble Wang Ye, was unexpectedly better. This was to take apart and look at it. Overall, anyone could see that Li Hongyuan clearly held the advantage. Although it was not to the point of being one-sided, but, when Li Hongyuan landed 10 times on He Zhihai's body, He Zhihai landed 3 or 4 times on his body. This kind of disparity was still quite big. Thus, if He Zhihai wanted to defeat Li Hongyuan, it was impossible without time to grow. Moreover, the premise was that Jin Qinhuang stopped here, and He Zhihai rapidly rose. In other people's eyes, this kind of situation was probably impossible. Even if Jin Qinhuang did not have as much room for growth as He Zhihai, he should not be able to maintain his peak and then go downhill. However, the fact was indeed so. Li Hongyuan was very clear that right now, he was at his peak state and basically would not rise again. However, he would continue this state for several decades. He Zhihai belonged to the type that became more courageous with more setbacks. He was repeatedly injured in Li Hongyuan's hands, but he became more and more excited. That feeling, it was as if he was about to ignite. Li Hongyuan's feeling was actually a bit similar. After all, a rare opponent could not be found in the capital. Moreover, when they faced him, they were always subconsciously afraid of him. They were absolutely not like He Zhihai, who only had eyes for opponents, he would go all out, without respect of seniority. On the other hand, when Li Hongyuan had more contact with He Zhihai in his previous life, he was more than one level lower than He Zhihai. It was okay to stop when it came to exchanging blows, but a real fight was absolutely impossible. At that time, unless it was on the battlefield, He Zhihai would not go all out. However, he was also a person who did not like to restrain himself from fighting. Therefore, he basically no longer fought with his own people. It was only Li Hongyuan, the emperor, who had the absolute advantage of his identity and was not very weak himself, that he could fight everywhere. Even so, when it was time to fight, he still did not hesitate. Therefore, He Zhihai was a guy who even dared to fight with the emperor. Now, the situation was reversed from that time. Li Hongyuan's heart was more or less a little happy. Especially He Zhinwei, this gatekeeper. He always felt that his own son's path was a bit similar to Jin Qinhuang's. However, if he looked carefully, it seemed completely different. It was really strange. With one look, he knew that the masters of these two people should be completely different. In the end, he could not find the reason. Either it was because of some coincidence, or there was a certain connection between the ancestors of the two families. Thus, he did not pursue it. Because the two people were fighting with fire, the battle situation was getting bigger and bigger. Going back and forth, they arrived in front of the weapon rack. Because the movements were too fast, no one saw who took out the weapon first. One was a spear, the other a halberd. Because they were not used to it, it was somewhat inconvenient in their hands, whether it was the weight or the length. However, the two people's situation was the same, so it did not matter. The weapons collided and sparks flew. Along with the familiarity of the weapon, it gradually became a part of the body. The more precise the control, the greater the lethality could be, and the less it could be. It depended on the mentality of the person using it. But these two people, would the lethality be small? Sure enough, blood was soon seen. On He Zhihai's arm, because the color of the clothes was relatively light, the bloodstains were very obvious. He Zhenwei did not have any reaction. People like him could basically judge the severity of the wound based on the bloodstains. That kind of injury was nothing to He Zhihai. However, not everyone was as calm as him. For many people, especially the civil officials, it was absolutely the first time for them to fight such a fierce battle. Naturally, they were so nervous that they sweated all over. Unsurprisingly, the following injuries became more and more serious, and Li Hongyuan was no exception. When Li Hongyuan was injured for the first time, Lu Qingdi stood up with a whoosh and directly shouted to stop. Unfortunately, perhaps the people on the field did not hear it, or perhaps they did not want to pay attention to him. Anyway, they continued to fight. The imperial guards guarding around did not dare to rashly step forward. Lu Qingdi directly ordered Yu Zhongxing to go up and separate the two people. Your Majesty, I am not strong enough, and I'm afraid I can't do anything. Moreover, the prince and young master here are fighting fiercely. If a third person rashly intervenes, they may be worried about the third person's life and slightly divert their attention. If the other party does not pay attention, it may cause more casualties. Therefore, Your Majesty, please think twice. Having said it so clearly, Lu Qingdi had to think thrice even if he did not. However, if they continued to fight, who knew what the situation would be? Lu Qingdi had nowhere to vent his anger, so he looked coldly at He Zhenwei. The one who injured his son was He Zhenwei's son. At this time, he did not care whether you were a meritorious official or not. He Zhenwei smiled bitterly in his heart, but what could he do? He could only silently endure. Being with the emperor was like being with a tiger. This was not a joke. The emperor's words were golden, but in fact, when he was capricious, no one could withstand it. He was more worried about his son's health. His son was at a disadvantage, and his son was more seriously injured. Originally, under normal circumstances, the battle would not last long. However, He Zhenhai could not follow normal logic. He was simply a typical example of someone who became stronger when facing a stronger opponent. Just when everyone was worried that the fight would really go out of control, this fight unexpectedly ended. Although He Zhenhai's halberd was hooked onto Li Hongyuan's spear, the spearhead was pressed against the other party's neck. It cut through the skin, and blood dripped down the shiny spearhead. If it went in another inch, He Zhenhai's life would have been taken. Li Hongyuan withdrew his hand and casually threw the spear away. He Zhenhai threw the halberd away and laughed, satisfying, it's really too satisfying. Lu Qingdi and the others had already hurried over, one hand holding Li Hongyuan's arm. Yuan, how's your injury? Li Hongyuan stood around. Imperial father, you're pinching my wound. Lu Qingdi hurriedly let go. Looking at his hand full of blood, he was completely furious. Come, take this insolent. Imperial father, swords have no eyes. It's just some superficial wounds. Why do you have to make a big fuss? Besides, this son is also having a good time beating them up. Li Hongyuan revealed a pure smile. This smile made Lu Qingdi stare blankly. No matter what, he basically never saw Li Hongyuan smile like this. It was too similar to his birth mother. After a moment, he sighed dejectedly. His anger was completely gone. Where's the imperial physician? Still not hurrying over to treat their injuries. He Jinwei breathed a sigh of relief. Just now, he almost had a heart attack. However, at this moment, he also recognized his son's words. Jin Qinhuang might not be that bad. He Jinhai was still in a state of excitement and was completely unaware of the danger that almost took his life. In the end, this was not the place to treat the wounds. After the imperial physician took Li Hongyuan's pulse, his blood was vigorous, there was no sign of weakness, and there were no internal injuries. Only then did Lu Qingdi feel relieved. In the past, when you didn't get along with your brothers, you always said that it was just a small quarrel and nothing serious. I didn't believe it before, but now I really believe it. With today's situation, he didn't need to use much, he only used 30% of his strength. If the others didn't die, they would be crippled. But in fact, at most, it was just a bit of flesh pain. It would have been better if he didn't say it. When he said it, some people on the side couldn't help but tremble. Just now, they were too nervous and didn't think of this. Now that they thought about it, not to mention the others, Prince Kong felt his lower back hurt. How much courage did he have to dare to wave his fist at Li Hongyuan at that time? The more he thought about it, the more he felt a lingering fear. After all, he really felt the killing intent at that time. If the other party didn't stop in the end, his little life might really have been lost. In the future, he must avoid this living king of hell. It was fine if he didn't know his true strength, but if he knew, he still went up to find fault with him. How stupid would he be to do such a thing? For Li Hongyuan, this might be an unexpected harvest. He Jinwei didn't dare to leave him in the palace to treat his wounds. If by chance the emperor saw this kid and was unhappy, he directly killed him. He wouldn't even have a place to cry. He just wanted to let the imperial physician give him a hasty bandage and then immediately leave the palace. However, what imperial physician, what lousy, everything was thrown to one side by He Jinhai. He just looked at Li Hongyuan. Wang Ye, fight again next time. He Jinwei's eyes darkened. He just wanted to slap this evil creature to death. Although from the beginning, he knew that it probably wouldn't be over with just one fight. After all, when he was in the northeast border city, he would always challenge opponents who were stronger than him again and again until he completely defeated the opponent. His progress could be said to be godlike and exceptionally astonishing. However, at a certain point, this speed would slow down. Looking at the gap between him and Prince Jin, how could it take 1 or 2 years? This was still under the condition that he absolutely could surpass. What if he couldn't? Could it be that he would always pester the other party to fight? Thinking about that scene, he felt that his life was gloomy. Evil creature, shut up for me. You think everyone is like you, only knowing how to fight and kill all day. Wang Ye condescended to exchange pointers with you once, and you still want a yard after getting an inch? He Jinhai immediately became dejected, like an abandoned puppy, listless and pitiful. It inexplicably made people feel a little distressed. Lu Qingdi was paying attention to Li Hongyuan's mood. He saw that there was a slight change on his face, as if he tacitly agreed with He Jinwei's words. However, Lu Qingdi felt that this shouldn't be the case. Thinking about his son's previous smile, this son looked carefree and wanton before, he might not really be happy, right? Beloved official, he doesn't need to be like this. As the saying goes, meeting one's match is also a great joy in life. It's fine to exchange pointers, but you are not allowed to use weapons. In addition, you must stop when it's appropriate. Your Majesty, do you think that you are safe without weapons? Too naive. In a flash, little tyrant he was in high spirits again, beaming with joy. That stupid look made people unable to look straight at him. General, he really wanted to cover his face. This wasn't his son. To be this stupid, pitiful and whatnot, it was all fake. Yuan, what do you think? Lu Qingdi asked with a smile. Li Hongyuan glanced at him expressionlessly and lowered his head to fix his cuffs. Life is too boring. It doesn't matter if I stretch my muscles once in a while. This son will take his leave first. After saying this, he delicately left and went to Jade Essence Palace. Lu Qingdi shook his head and laughed. He was obviously very happy, but he still kept a straight face, as if someone owed him millions of taels of silver. Since sixth brother likes to stretch your muscles, when little young master he came to find you, you should have directly agreed. Why wait until, obviously, he was trying to stir up trouble again. But before he could finish, Lu Qingdi gave him a cold stare. Putting aside the fact that the opponent who came to his door was not the one he liked, he was a prince. How could he respond so casually? Did he have to fight with any Tom, Dick, or Harry who came to his door? Forget it. Except for the throne, for Lu Qingdi, Li Hongyuan was his son. Nothing else mattered. Li Hongyuan went to Jade Essence Palace. When he went to change clothes, noble consort Su knew what he was going to do. But she didn't expect that he would return with injuries. Imperial concubine Su almost exploded on the spot. Her son was a prince, a king. In her opinion, a spar between children was nothing serious. There would definitely be no problem. After all, he was just the son of an official, the kind that had no official rank or title. It was obvious that no matter what, he would never dare to really hurt someone. However, reality gave her a slap in the face. Li Hongyuan took off his clothes and let the imperial physician apply medicine on him. Noble consort Su didn't avoid him and just looked at him with a distressed expression. Li Hongyuan first closed his eyes. In fact, this kind of injury didn't matter. He would be fine after some rest. He didn't want to pay attention to noble consort Su, but noble consort Su kept sobbing. Li Hongyuan heard it and felt annoyed. He opened his eyes and a hint of helplessness quickly appeared in his eyes. Mother, don't worry. I'm really fine. I know. Compared to last year, this isn't an injury at all. I'm still far from death. It would have been better if he didn't mention it. Now that he mentioned it, noble consort Su cried even more fiercely. How can you talk like that? Besides, how can you say the word death so casually? I will be careful. I won't be injured next time. Mother, don't cry. Li Hongyuan didn't know how to coax people, so his words seemed a little stiff. There will be a next time. Noble consort Su's voice suddenly rose a lot. Imperial mother knows that in the capital, no one dares to truly fight with this prince. This son also has nothing else to do. Today, I fought with General He's youngest son. This person is different from others and had a good fight. This son felt pretty good. Imperial mother should also know what kind of personality this son has. Imperial father has also agreed to this matter, so there will definitely be a next time. I've made Imperial mother worry, so this son asks for Imperial mother's forgiveness. Li Hongyuan was slightly ashamed and couldn't help lowering his voice a bit. Noble consort Su's lips trembled, but in the end, she didn't say anything to stop him. This son wasn't any worse than his other brothers. In fact, he was even better. However, his father emperor gave him a lot of doting, but suppressed him in terms of power. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't be happy. It was already good enough that they didn't hate his mother as well. It was probably because of this that the emperor was especially indulgent towards him. Then you must be careful. Don't get injured again. Li Hongyuan smiled. Mother, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. The imperial physician was concentrating on treating the wound. He looked down as if he was too focused and didn't hear what the mother and son were saying. After the wound was treated, the palace maid from Jade Palace brought over warm water to wipe Li Hongyuan's body. She lowered her head, her face red, and looked very shy. Li Hongyuan frowned, and annoyance flashed through his eyes. He directly reached out to take the handkerchief and did it himself. But just as the handkerchief fell on his body, another hand reached over. Yuan, mother, do it. Li Hongyuan's hand paused. When he met noble consort Su's gentle gaze, he finally let go and closed his eyes again. The feeling of the handkerchief rubbing against his skin was exceptionally clear. Noble consort Su's movements were very gentle, as if she was afraid of hurting him. If it was Jingwan, Li Hongyuan would probably enjoy it very much. But it wasn't her. This slow thing made him a little impatient. In this life, he acted the most in front of noble consort Su. Although it wasn't a big deal to him, he still found it tiresome. Mother, this sun is not made of porcelain. There's no need to be so careful. It won't break. What nonsense are you talking about? Shut up. She gently patted him. In fact, noble consort Su had noticed some other wounds on Li Hongyuan's body. Although they weren't obvious and the imperial physician didn't dare to look at them carefully, she was different. She knew very well how they were caused. In particular, there were teeth marks in certain places. Because his skin looked whiter than normal, it was obvious that they were left after the blood had healed. Although she didn't know if he didn't have a concubine by his side, no matter whether he did or not, there was no other person who would dare to leave bite marks and scratches on his body except for his princess consort. Because she already had a big opinion of Jingwan, she was even more angry now. As a wife, how dare she be so presumptuous? Her son was such a precious person, how dare she offend him? It was simply outrageous. Moreover, as a wife, she should be dignified and virtuous. Even in bed, she should know how to be reserved. She didn't know how licentious she was. Even a concubine who used her sex appeal to others wouldn't be to this extent. At this moment, noble consort Su even knew why her son was seduced by his princess consort. As the saying went, as long as one felt that it was a bad thing from the beginning, then no matter what one did, there would be thorns in it. Although noble consort Su felt indignant, she didn't show it on her face. However, she was already thinking in her heart. Since her son liked women who were more wild in bed, she would help him adjust. She would teach them both. As a prince, how could there be no one to serve him? Her son shouldn't be so wronged. In noble consort Su's opinion, her son cared about the birth of his child. She was only taught to serve him, so he shouldn't refuse. Besides, no matter how this servant was in bed, she would never dare to leave a trace on her son's body. Li Hongyuan didn't know what noble consort Su was thinking at this time. If he knew, he wouldn't say anything. She would just wait to be slapped in the face. The bloodstains on his body were all wiped clean. Li Hongyuan put on his prince's imperial robe again. It was impossible to tell that he was injured at all. Noble consort Su tidied his clothes. My son is indeed handsome and elegant. Li Hongyuan chuckled. Everyone says that this son is useless except for this body. Mother, you're really praising yourself. Nonsense, how can Yuan be useless? Those people only know how to spread false rumors. How can they know how good my son is? Noble consort Su was proud to have raised such a son. If mother thinks he's good, then he's good. This son will be leaving the palace now. Noble consort Su wanted to urge him to stay, but in the end, she didn't say anything. It wasn't good for an adult prince to hang around in the harem for a long time. You must pay attention to your wound. Since your estate's doctor is skilled, you might have better medicine. If you do, you can change it when you go back. This son understands. I'll be leaving now. Noble consort Su went out with him and saw Li Hongming in the outer hall. When Li Hongming saw the two of them together, he went forward without saying anything. With his mother around, he wouldn't ignore him. However, Li Hongyuan really ignored him. He took a step to the side and brushed past him. Li Hongming froze on the spot. He never hid his emotions in front of noble consort Su, so the gloomy expression on his face was quite obvious. Li Hongming then looked at noble consort Su's unkind eyes. The corners of his mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. At that moment, noble consort Su really wanted to slap him. You still want to scheme over such a small matter? If you don't have the slightest bit of sincerity, who would care about you? What did I teach you for so many years? Did it all go to waste? You thought that if he ignored you, Mother might be sad. You even schemed against Mother, but didn't you think that Mother would be sad? You want to pretend to be brothers at this time. Do you think I don't know your true relationship? What's the use of pretending in front of me? I think you're used to pretending. You don't forget your words and actions at all times. I told you before that if you want to achieve great things, you have to create a good image. However, I also told you that going too far is as bad as falling short. You're like this even in front of your close relatives. Even if you succeed in the end, will everyone betray you? Li Hongming was scolded by noble consort Su until his face turned green and white. After a moment, he said, Mother, this son knows his mistake. You don't only know your mistake with your mouth. Scram. Just looking at you makes me annoyed. This son will take his leave. Li Hongming responded in a low voice. Then he turned and left. After leaving the Jade Essence Palace, Li Hongming put on a perfect mask again in the blink of an eye. He always had to be magnanimous, elegant, and gentle to others. He looked like he was courteous to the wise and let people feel that he valued you. He made people feel that even if their status was low, he wouldn't see through them. There was no difference in status between heaven and earth. Deep down, he was the most indifferent, ruthless, and selfish. In his eyes, other people were nothing but useful. However, at this time, Li Hongming was very clear that he had to reconcile with Li Hongyuan. After seeing Li Hongyuan's martial strength, this matter was even more urgent. Even if he pushed everything back, now was a critical period. There were too many things to do, and he couldn't afford to toss them around. Li Hongyuan was actually a little worried at this time. He was injured, and Wan knew about it. It wouldn't be a problem to fool around for the first few days, but even if the wound healed, it would leave a scar. Sooner or later, it would be known. After a few days, there might be another crime of concealing and not reporting. Sure enough, he had a good fight for a while, but there were a lot of troublesome things later. Therefore, this was the difference between caring and not caring. Li Hongyuan went to Imperial Concubine Su's place with a body full of injuries. He didn't care about Imperial Concubine Su's feelings at all. As for Jingwan, on the one hand, he was afraid that she would be worried. On the other hand, he was a little inexplicably timid. Imagine, if it was Jingwan who hurt him, no matter what the reason was, he was afraid that he would explode. Even if Wan knew the reason for his actions and understood, it would be difficult to forgive him. The more he thought about it, the more his head hurt. After returning to the prince's mansion, Li Hongyuan's attitude unknowingly became a little careful. They hadn't been married for long, but after all, they were the closest people to each other. Jingwan naturally noticed it at the first moment. She narrowed her eyes slightly and examined Li Hongyuan. Unexpectedly, she didn't directly come up to kiss and hug him. It should be known that as long as it was in private, his actions couldn't be too natural and casual. Ah Yuan, did you do something wrong to me? Li Hongyuan coughed lightly, then pulled Jingwan's hand into his embrace and rubbed it against the side of his neck. How could I? His attitude was simply fawning and acting coquettishly, yet he still dared to say that there was no problem. Then, Jingwan smelled a trace of something strange on Li Hongyuan. Her sense of smell was originally more sensitive than that of ordinary people. Therefore, she tilted her head back and pressed a finger against Li Hongyuan's forehead. Speak. If you confess, you'll be lenient. If you resist, you'll be strict. Li Hongyuan was a little helpless. I was a little injured today. Jingwan's expression was a little dangerous. And then, when I was practicing with He Zhihai, he said that he was a little injured, but Jingwan didn't really believe that it was just a little injury. Moreover, he said, if you could get injured in a practice session, I presume that Your Highness is quite selfless. Your Highness and the young master of the He family are really love-hate, huh? Isn't that right, Your Highness? Then, she placed her hand on his shoulder, one hand moving along his arm and the other along his chest, caressing down inch by inch. Of course, that was if one ignored the strength of her hand and that creepy smile. Not to mention Li Hongyuan, even the servants by the side knew that the princess consort was angry. And from the looks of it, it seemed that she was quite angry. Li Hongyuan let out a muffled groan, and a painful expression appeared on his face. It was as if it was painful to look at. Jingwan subconsciously reduced her strength. Now you know it's painful. Your Highness didn't seem to have any abnormalities at all before. Actually, it's not painful, really. Li Hongyuan looked calm and indifferent, as if he didn't care at all. Jingwan fiercely pinched him again, and as expected, she saw Li Hongyuan's expression change again. For a moment, Jingwan didn't know if he was deliberately pretending to gain sympathy, or if it was really very painful. However, it was inevitable that it would hurt when injured. As long as the nerves of pain were normal, then it depended on the person's ability to endure pain. This man was a strong person, but in the end, he was raised in luxury. Go call Gong Jiu over. In the end, worry and heartache took over. Even if it was treated, Jingwan was still worried. She watched as Gong Jiu unbandaged the wound and checked if it was necessary to apply medicine again. Then, Jingwan was so angry that she didn't know where to vent her anger. This was called a little injury. Even if she counted them one by one, it would take a long time. Even Gong Jiu said that it was a little injury. However, if it was her previous life, even a small wound would need at least 2 or 3 stitches. Was this a little injury? Jingwan didn't say anything and just sat there with a cold face. She didn't feel anything in front of noble consort Su, but now, she felt as if there was a knife at her back. Li Hongyuan sighed in his heart. This injury was really nothing to him. Gong Jiu wasn't affected. He immediately saw what medicine was used on the wound and prepared to add a medicine that wouldn't inhibit the medicine, but could speed up the healing process. Gong Jiu, the medicine you used on young Master He last time should have good effects on external and internal injuries, right? Use that medicine on Wang Ye. The former secret guard, who had been silent for a long time, was now the Fu doctor. His hands couldn't help but tremble. Wang Fei really couldn't be offended. Even if Wang Yi did something wrong, he still had to be punished. After a pause, he said, Wang Fei, Wang Ye has already applied medicine. That medicine and this medicine, what's wrong? Jingwan asked with a smiley face. Gong Jiu subconsciously shut his mouth. The fake smile on the princess's face was a little frightening. Use it. Li Hongyuan didn't say anything. As long as it could calm his wife down, it didn't matter if it hurt a little more. Gong Jiu was still a little hesitant. His master didn't know the power of the medicine. It should be known that in their eyes, He Zhihai was definitely a tough guy. Moreover, he was born and grew up in the border town, so he definitely suffered a lot. However, before the White Dragon Temple last year, it was estimated that his master's skin had not been broken. Although they were quite surprised to see his master's endurance at that time, there was still no way to compare him with He Jihai, who was really thick-skinned and rough. They had completely seen He Jihai's situation at that time. Although the effect was good, because it was too painful, if he couldn't bear it, he might die of pain. Master didn't care, but Gong Jiu still wanted to say something to Jingwan, but Li Hongyuan stopped him with his eyes. Gong Jiu learned a lot of skills at a young age, so he was naturally very smart. How could he not know his master's meaning? If it weren't for his poker face, he might have twitched at this moment. In order to take advantage of the princess consort, he would resort to any means. Now, in order to ask for forgiveness, he would naturally be scheming. It should be known that even if the princess consort was angry, she would definitely forgive him after some time. However, he had to resort to such means. Seeing Gong Jiu's reaction, Jingwan naturally noticed something strange. Taking the medicine might be more terrible than she expected. She was hesitating and decided to give up. However, Gong Jiu, who was a man of action, had taken the medicine out of the medicine box and decisively sprinkled it on one of the smaller wounds. In a very short time after that, Li Hongyuan's painful voice burst out, but he subconsciously swallowed it back. His teeth were tightly clenched, his body was convulsing, and the blue veins on the back of his hands, forehead, and neck were bulging. He looked quite scary. Jingwan was even more frightened by his reaction. This medicine was more terrible than she expected. It was countless times more terrible. Jingwan didn't care about being angry. She told him to remember the lesson and not to mess around next time. She also forgot about it and hugged Li Hongyuan. Gong Jiu, hurry up and remove the medicine. What are you waiting for? Jingwan was so anxious that her eyes turned red. In fact, Gong Jiu had already prepared for this. He used a small amount of medicine, and now he quickly scraped off the powder. However, after all, it was on the wound, so there must be some residual medicine. Princess, the residual medicine may gradually lose its effect in half an hour. Wash it off. Wash it off immediately. Use clear liquor. Qi Yuan's winemaking skill was quite good. There were several kinds of clear and mellow liquor with a high alcohol content. Gong Jiu didn't question Jingwan's words, and Eunuch Mu moved faster. He brought the best clear liquor as fast as he could. Normally, when the liquor touched the wound, it would be extremely painful. However, the stimulation of the liquor was completely indifferent. The medicine that was still floating on the surface of the wound could be washed off, but what about the medicine that was deep in the blood? He could only wait for the medicine to lose its effect. Seeing Li Hongyuan in so much pain, Jingwan burst into tears. I'm sorry. It's my fault. It's all my fault. I shouldn't be angry because you don't cherish yourself and do such a thing. Yuan, Jingwan was careful not to touch other wounds. Li Hongyuan was actually quite conscious, but he couldn't speak. He was worried that he would cry out if he opened his mouth. As for other wounds, he couldn't feel them at all at this moment. Jingwan wanted to let go, but he held her tightly. However, extreme pain often led to the increase of strength. Hearing Jingwan's muffled groan, he subconsciously pushed her away. Whether it was pain or itch, they could be transferred in other ways. He just didn't know how effective it was now. Jingwan pushed Gong Jiu and the others away, and then leaned forward to avoid his wounds. She tried her best to arouse his desire. To be honest, since they got married, Jingwan had taken the initiative, but it was definitely the first time that she was so enthusiastic. Li Hongyuan was slightly stunned. At that moment, the pain might have really been alleviated, but in fact, he still couldn't respond to her. He didn't even dare to open his mouth when she kissed him on the lips. He was afraid that he would bite her. Perhaps it was really too painful. This desire didn't rise so easily, but Jingwan didn't show any signs of stopping. She didn't know how much time had passed, but when Li Hongyuan hugged Jingwan and kissed her, she realized that the effects of the drug might have worn off. However, she didn't push him away. Her expression was as if she was facing a porcelain doll that would break at the slightest touch. Li Hongyuan laughed. "It's all right." His voice was a little low. It wasn't a long time, but it consumed a lot of his strength. "Laugh. You can still laugh." Jingwan was angry and anxious. "Wan, you're not angry anymore." "Of course, I can laugh." "Who told you I'm not angry?" Looking at him, it was as if he was using the trick of injuring himself. Jingwan hated him so much that she wanted to slap him. "You're still angry. Then, do you want some more?" "Again. Do you want to die of pain, or do you want me to die of heartache?" Why was this bastard always so irritating? Okay. We won't do it. Don't talk about death. I don't like it. Then you hurt yourself. Do I like it? Ah, Yuan, you hurt yourself, but my heart hurts. Don't play like this in the future, no matter what you want to do. I don't care if you're teaching people or just itching to play, but you should at least take care of yourself. Otherwise, even if it's some big plan, I may stop you from doing it. Okay, there won't be a next time. I promise. Seeing Jingwan like this, how could Li Hongyuan not feel heartache? The feeling of fighting with He Zhihai before has faded. Jingwan was still concerned about Li Hongyuan's injury. She didn't care about how she looked now and called Gongzhou in. Gongzhou didn't look sideways. He just seriously treated Li Hongyuan's wound. As for some indescribable marks, he ignored them. After everything was taken care of, Jingwan opened her mouth again. "Wang Ye, did you do it on purpose just now? Don't tell me you don't know the effect of that medicine. Wan, you've wronged me. I really didn't know the effect of that medicine was so powerful." Jingwan glanced at Gongzhou. "Gongzhou, you're also a blockhead. Your master doesn't know, but you must know. He asked you to use it, so you used it. Don't you know how to measure it yourself?" Originally, he wanted to be in the background and wait for his master's order to let him go out. In the end, Wang Fei took out her anger on him. He was shot while lying down. Don't think he didn't know that his master was just passing the blame. But, as a shadow guard, even if it's a thing of the past, they still have to take the blame for their master. In all kinds of ways. This subordinate knows his mistake. Chapter 385. Gongzhou, who had blocked his mistress's heart, was sent away. Outside in the corridor, he met Fu Rong, who was wearing a veil. She did this not because she cared about her appearance, but because she didn't want to dirty her mistress's eyes. According to Jingwan, she didn't care. Before she got married, she had seen her sister-in-law's face many times. But Fu Rong refused with a smile. According to her, her mistress's kindness was not a reason for her to not follow the rules. In the end, before she served Jingwan, everything she experienced was different from ordinary people. Deep in her heart, she was somewhat sensitive. Compared to others, she was more afraid of doing the wrong thing. Therefore, it was inevitable that she would be more cautious. In this situation, Jingwan didn't know how to deal with it. In the end, she let her be. She also told the other maidservants that they didn't need to be special in front of Fu Rong. Only when she felt that she was the same as the people around her and completely dispelled the shadow hidden in the bottom of her heart, could she be considered a real new life. Gongzhou followed his duty. "I have a lot of good medicine that can remove scars. Even if it can't remove scars, it can make them fade a lot. If you want, come find me. I will prepare the medicine for you. Thank you, Gongzi. This servant doesn't feel that there is anything wrong. Gongzi doesn't need to worry about this servant. In this regard, Gongzhou didn't care. Do as you wish. Whenever you want, you can come find me. He rolled up his sleeves and left with his hands behind his back. Fu Rong didn't have any emotional fluctuations and continued to quietly complete her task. Inside the room, after such a thing, Li Hongyuan's body was covered in sweat. Obviously, he couldn't take a bath during this time. Jingwan asked someone to bring water and personally wiped his body. Compared to noble consort Su, Jingwan was much more violent. She only avoided the wound, but the rest of her body was still filled with anger and was venting her anger. There were even several times when she wanted to directly hit Li Hongyuan's face. In fact, when she was finally done, it seemed that she really wanted to do so. Li Hongyuan looked at the stuff on his face and thought, why is she still angry? Sigh, this woman is really hard to coax. However, no matter how hard it was to coax her, she was still his wife. No matter how hard it was to coax her, he had to coax her. Otherwise, if Wan was unhappy, he would be unhappy too. After he finished speaking, Li Hongyuan didn't move for a long time. He put his hands on his hips and just watched. Therefore, when Li Hongyuan took off the mask on his face, he saw his wife staring straight at him. Her expression was not very good. Li Hongyuan was inexplicably shocked. He threw the towel aside and reached out to pull Jingwan into his arms. Jingwan hurriedly put her hand on his shoulder, afraid that she would touch his wound. Then, she hit him angrily. Who told you to touch me? Let go of me. Li Hongyuan didn't let go at all. He let her sit on his lap and rubbed his chin on her shoulder. My wife, if I don't touch you, am I supposed to touch an outsider? He was obviously deliberately twisting her meaning. Jingwan was so angry that she hit him again. Wan's temper is getting worse and worse. Think about it. Before we got married, she accepted more gifts. Even if she was angry with me, she wouldn't go against me. Now, she hits people for no reason. She's so fierce. Li Hongyuan chuckled and complained. What, do you like someone who's well-behaved in front of you? Then I'm sorry, the one you're holding now has been spoiled by you. She only knows how to be lawless and doesn't know how to behave. If you don't like her and are unhappy, just throw her away and find someone else. How easy is that? Jingwan said coldly. Li Hongyuan opened his mouth and bit her red lips. Even if she's spoiled, it's because I spoiled her. No matter what other people think, I still like her. How can I bear to throw her away? You have to know that I spent a lot of effort to spoil her so much that she's throwing a little temper. You're not allowed to say something like finding someone else in the future. Even if you're angry, you can't say it. I don't like it. I really don't like it. If you dare to say it again, I'm afraid that I'll really make you unable to get out of bed for 3 days. Jingwan's nose was dry and her eyes were not very comfortable. She knew that she was becoming more and more delicate. Other people were still fine and rational, but there was no other way. She couldn't control her emotions at all. Like this, she was afraid that she really couldn't leave this man. Jingwan hugged him, but her body still subconsciously avoided the wounds on his body. She bit his shoulder twice, but not as hard as usual, leaving only 2 bite marks. This is your purpose, isn't it? Spoiling me so much that I can't leave you no matter what, right? Li Hongyuan patted her head and smiled a little proudly. That's right. I want to spoil you so much that no one else can't stand your delicateness. You'll be picky with everyone else. You can only live comfortably by my side. Jingwan snorted twice. Then you have to continue to work hard. You're still far from that step. Let me tell you, I'm not someone who can be bought off by luxurious food and clothes. I know. Our Wan is the pickiest. Nothing that could capture her heart would ever be an external object. Jingwan hugged his neck, but her body was slightly bent. It was obvious that she would be uncomfortable. Li Hongyuan wanted to adjust her posture, but Jingwan didn't let him. Don't treat your injury lightly. Be honest. It's really nothing. This injury is completely negligible compared to Wan's unhappiness. Jingwan raised her head and looked at him with slightly red eyes. You did it on purpose. You deliberately tortured yourself to make me feel uncomfortable so that I'll forgive you. Then, the next time something similar happens, you'll still hurt yourself like this and then do the same thing again. Wan's words are a little harsh. Seeing you feel uncomfortable is more painful than anything else. When you cried like that just now, it was like cutting my heart with a blunt knife. I really promise you that this kind of thing will never happen again. So, don't be angry, okay? There had to be a limit to what he could do. He couldn't let his heart hurt and hurt his body. Okay, if you're more obedient, I won't be angry. Then Wan, tell me. What do you want your husband to do? I'll listen to you. Li Hongyuan's smile was shallow, but gentle and doting. Let go. Hurry up and put on your clothes. Don't you see what kind of weather it is? Don't be injured and catch a cold. This time, Li Hongyuan was very obedient. He let go of Jingwan and quickly put on his clothes. Jingwan fixed his hair. Okay, it was purely symbolic. Whether it was dressing herself or helping others, compared to Li Hongyuan, Jingwan was far worse. It's inconvenient to bathe, but your hair needs to be washed. It's all wet with sweat. She turned back to have someone prepare hot water in the clean room. Wan, are you going to do it yourself? Just let me and serve you. Jingwan coolly glanced at him. I'm not willing. What, do you dislike Chia for being clumsy and not being able to serve our Jin Qinwang well? Don't worry, forget about other things, but this isn't a problem. When I was 10 years old, I washed grandmother's hair. Other people can't catch up to me. Li Hongyuan tickled her nose, little heartless. Do you not know if your husband loves you dearly or dislikes you? Jingwan laughed. I know. It's me who wants to wash Yuan's hair. It's fine, it's not a big deal. Do you really want me to become someone who stretches out my hand for clothes and opens my mouth for food and not do anything? In the long run, I'll really become a 9th grade handicap. 9th grade handicap. Li Hongyuan raised his eyebrows. I just don't know how to do anything. You're considered a noble girl born in a prestigious family and now you're Ben Wang's Wang Fei. Isn't it normal that you don't know how to do anything? So what if you're a 9th grade handicap? Jingwan wanted to be speechless. Even a young lady from a prestigious family was far from being this good. Where did this man want to pamper her? He clearly wanted to spoil her until she was ruined. At that time, old Luo Furen's health wasn't very good and it wasn't convenient for her to wash her face and rinse her mouth. Jingwan also had 2 reclining chairs made according to the ones she used to wash her hair in her previous life. In the end, that thing gradually spread in Qianfu. Among the dowry furniture that was made for Jingwan, 2 sets were specially made. Now, not only was it popular in the Ministry of Personnel, after Jingwan agreed, it was also popular in Jin Qinwang Fu. The one that Jingwan had people make wasn't that flat. It was relatively slanted and could only be considered as sitting or lying down, not sleeping or reclining. Counting it, this was indeed the first time that Jingwan washed Li Hongyuan's hair. In the past, at most, she would casually wash it when they were bathing together. Li Hongyuan had to admit that Jingwan was indeed very good at this point. Perhaps it was because she was taking care of her grandmother. That was an elderly patient. Of course, she would be attentive, gentle, and even give an appropriate massage. Li Hongyuan was so comfortable that he almost fell asleep. Wang Ye, Prince Rui is outside the door and wants to see you. Gong Momo gently lifted the curtain of the clean room and said softly. I won't see him. If he comes later, there's no need to report to Ben Wang. I'll forgive him a few more times. The meaning couldn't be more obvious. Just like little gangster he before, as for when to see him, it completely depended on Li Hongyuan's mood. As for whether Prince Rui would stop coming after being refused the door. Even if he really didn't come, to be honest, it had nothing to do with Jin Qin Wang Fu. Li Hongyuan was rather low-key this time. He only brought one person, one or two ordinary small carriages and a coachman. Being refused the door was also within Li Hongming's expectations. He had also mentally prepared himself. Therefore, if he couldn't do it today, he would come tomorrow. In any case, one day at a time, he was bound to achieve his goal. He stood in front of Jin Qin Wang Fu for a moment to ensure that there were people from other Fu who could see him, but also not to the extent of attracting a crowd to watch him leave. He wanted to let people know his sincerity, but also not to the extent of making people feel that he was forcing them. However, this little trick was nothing in Li Hongyuan's eyes. Moreover, he didn't care about his reputation and didn't mind being talked about. As for Li Hongming's sincerity, it wasn't within the scope of Li Hongyuan's concern. He only wanted to achieve his goal in the end. At this time, compared to Li Hongyuan's tenderness, little gangster he was much more miserable. Not to mention the whole family circling around him, showing him all kinds of care. Even his mother, grandmother, and sisters-in-law silently shed tears as they looked at the wounds on his body. This was purely a dream. One after another, they came to ridicule him. There was even someone who viciously patted his wounds twice. Seeing him grimace, they said, "Serves you right," and then clapped their hands and left. That was called unrestrained. As for those hideous wounds, in an ordinary family, the womenfolk might not even dare to look at them. If their own family's younger generation was like this, it could be said that they would cry to the heavens. In He family, it was very calm. From the master to the servant girls, they wouldn't even bat an eyelid. Towards this kind of miserable, this kind of heartless and cold family, He Jinghai didn't have any reaction. He was even happy as if he got a big treasure. He was foolishly happy. The old military doctor who applied medicine for him shook his head. Little Gongzi was valiant, but in some aspects, it was really a headache. If this temperament didn't change, he simply couldn't lead troops. One person's valiant was always limited. In the end, it was a pity. After He Jinghai put on his clothes, not to mention resting on the bed, he was still alive and kicking. He directly rushed to the martial arts field. He took a weapon and waved it vigorously. What were the wounds on his body? The wounds would burst open and not heal easily. What were those? Ignore all of them. When other people knew about this situation, the veins on their forehead jumped. Then they felt helpless. This was not the first time this kind of thing happened. As the head of the family, old madam he was the calmest. Someone go to Jin Wangfu and ask for 2 doses of medicine. Others were silent, but their hearts were in agreement. To be able to make people stop and also to speed up the healing of the wounds, it couldn't be better. As for the sequelae, who let them He family have a heart of stone. Alright, the main thing was that they were used to seeing life and death. Losing an arm or breaking a leg was a common occurrence. It was just a little bit of pain, that's all. And Jin Qin Wang Fu was especially generous, giving a lot of medicine for both internal and external use. Internal injuries were naturally to be taken orally, pills, external injuries were to be applied externally. Medicinal powders, sufficient quantities were naturally, in case of emergency. As for whether this was Jin Qinhuang Fei's special care, the He family did not need to know. He Jinghai was personally brought down from the martial arts field by his own mother and grandmother. No matter how undisciplined and out of control he was, at this time, he was as obedient as a kitten. It's just that when He Jinghai saw the medicine from Jin Wangfu, he thought of the terrible pain. The shadow in his heart grew so big that he wanted to run away. And the head of He family seemed to have foresight. He held Jia Fa and blocked the door. Today you dare to run out of this room and try. If you go out, you can still fight with Jin Wangfu. I will write my name upside down. This simply pinched his weak spot. Compared to the pain, not being able to fight with Jin Wangfu would only make him suffer more. Grandmother, this medicine is too overbearing. My wounds always heal quickly, so, can I not use it? Old madam, he sneered and didn't say a word. He Shao gangster succumbed to his grandmother's abuse of power and became He Shao pitiful. He went back with grievance and then started to take off his clothes. The old military doctor also heard about the power of this medicine, but in the end, he never saw it or tried it himself. But he had seen the effect of this medicine, so he was eager to try it. He smelled a lot of medicine, but there were still a lot of medicine left. Even if he took it back to study, there might not be any result. But now it's not the time to think about this. He should first see the effect with his own eyes. He Jinghai couldn't stop retreating. Facing the old military doctor who was laughing, he felt an unprecedented fear. There's actually something that can make Shao Gongzi afraid. It must be a good thing. Facing He Shao gangster many times, even if the old military doctor had a bodhisattva's heart, there would be a time when he became black-bellied. He Jinghai was speechless. What do you mean that the thing he is afraid of is a good thing? Even if he used to give the military doctor headaches, but he shouldn't be treated like this, right? Obviously, the old military doctor was also very scary. But in He Shao gangster's eyes, he was not a good thing. However, He Shao gangster didn't dare to talk back at this time. He simply closed his eyes, clenched his teeth, and clenched his fists. Before he could do anything, the blue veins on his body bulged. He looked like he was facing death calmly. Other people were even more interested in this medicine. The old military doctor's eyes were shining. Then, he started to treat He Jinghai's long and deep wound without any hesitation. He wasn't as careful as Gongzhou. Not long after the powder was applied, He Shao gangster's miserable howl was heard. It was deafening. Ordinary pain was nothing to He Jinghai. It was completely within his tolerance range. Most of the time, he could ignore it. But when he really couldn't stand it, he didn't care about his face. And he wasn't afraid that his family would worry about him. Therefore, he didn't feel any pressure at all. Seeing He Jinghai's miserable condition, the He family members were a bit shocked. They even felt pity for him. Why don't we not use it? It was said that the eldest sister-in-law was like a mother. He Jinghai was only a few years older than her son. Use it, why not use it? Anyway, this place hurts, and so does the whole body. It can't be that the more wounds there are, the more pain there is. It's good to let him feel more pain now. Only when he knows the pain, even when the pain is deep in his bones, will he be more careful in the future. Only then will he use his brain more and not be like a madman who doesn't care about anything, madam, he said calmly. When the others heard this, they all fell silent. Madam, his words weren't directed at Li Hongyuan. She was talking about the battlefield in He Jinghai. Just as madam, he said, when he really fought, he was a madman. On the battlefield, he was a madman. His combat strength increased, but he didn't kill many enemies. On the contrary, sometimes, he only cared about himself and would bring trouble to his own side. Moreover, he didn't care much about his injuries. With his combat strength, he shouldn't be injured, but he was injured almost every time. This kind of situation was actually very dangerous. The He family members didn't want him to die inexplicably on the battlefield one day. After all, as long as the enemy understood his personality, they could completely scheme against him. As long as he went deep into the enemy's camp, no matter how much he killed, he would be surrounded and killed by the sea of people. Old Witch, in the future, whenever this evil creature is injured, no matter if it's external or internal injuries, use this medicine. At most, we'll throw away this old face and go to Jin Wangfu to ask for more medicine. He Jinwei said coldly. Compared to the possibility of this evil creature losing his life for no reason one day, the pain of looking at him now was not worth it at all. Thus, little tyrant he was destined to have some tragedies in the future. In the next few days, there was basically nothing much to do because Jiangnan had already dealt with it. Not many people were beheaded directly, but there were many people who were locked up in prison and waiting to be exiled or squatted down. Naturally, there were more people who were demoted. Of course, there were also some who were transferred. The most special one was Governor Su. He originally had nothing to do with the Jiangnan salt corruption case, but because he was transferred and went to the coastal area, although the sea trade of Qiyuan was not developed, it was not closed off. Thus, although it was not as good as Jiangnan, it was still a place with rich oil and water. Thus, most people thought that it was just a normal transfer. In the entire officialdom of Jiangnan, those who were not dealt with were basically officials who were 5th rank and below. Thus, although they tried their best to control it, there were still some movements. Fortunately, the new official arrived in time, and it was believed that it would be stabilized soon. As the saying goes, when you pull out the radish, the mud will come out with it. However, Luqingdi's tolerance was limited now, so he did not deal with anyone in the capital. However, because of some specious words in the imperial court, the courtiers were all nervous and conscientious, and did not dare to act rashly. On the surface, there were no losses, but the losses in the dark were too great. The loss of manpower was secondary, but the loss of money was the most important thing. It would definitely make many people vomit blood secretly. Perhaps it was not obvious now, but as time went by, those who were used to being extravagant and whose main source of wealth was from Jiangnan would definitely be strapped for cash. At that time, no one knew what would happen. Li Hongyuan said that he would take away some people's money, but when he really took action, it was absolutely terrifying. They were bullied and suffered losses, but it was Luqingdi who gave them this. None of them dared to say anything, and they all pretended to be obedient like quails. And those who were not involved, but knew all the ways and means, all kept silent. What was different from others was that these people's hearts were very calm, or perhaps, they even had the mentality of watching a play. And there were also some people who were slightly different. They were people who were related to Peixe, or family members who were related to Peixe by marriage, or disciples of Peixe's great scholars. However, because these people were in the capital, they understood Jin Qinhuang's situation better. Thus, regardless of whether Peixe's matter was related to Jin Qinhuang or not, they could not and did not dare to do anything or say anything. If Peixe did not have so many negative things, even if they risked danger, they would still say a few words. For morality, for friendship, for face, the one who did not say or do not do anything would be them. Peixe had such a bad reputation, cutting off ties was simply natural. Even if it was brought up, they could still speak righteously, and even say that their previous friendship with Peixe was a disgrace, that they did not recognize people clearly, and even say that they were the victims who were deceived. Because these people all shrank back, naturally they also restrained the younger generation of their family. After all, at this time, if something happened, a small matter could become a big matter. Perhaps Luchingdi, who was still angry, would not let it go. The new and old debts would be settled together, and then he would kill the chicken to warn the monkey. Who knew what the outcome would be? As a result, the atmosphere in the capital was very strict, and the public security was very good. Of course, the businesses of brothels, pleasure boats, and dance halls were also seriously affected. At this time, a small matter could become the topic of conversation after tea and meal. There was no other way, it was too boring. Under these circumstances, Prince Rui went to Jin Qin Wang Fu every day to report, and every time he was met with a closed door. Even if it was not conspicuous, it would become conspicuous. How did Prince Rui offend Jin Qin Wang? Li Hongming was questioned whether it was true or false, or whether it was ridicule or schadenfreude. On the surface, there was helplessness, and the specifics were vague, but in his heart, there was hatred. Not only did he hate these people, but also Li Hongyuan. In his view, his attitude was already so low, even if Li Hongyuan was pretentious, there should be a limit. This time, he humiliated him again and again. Originally, because of Mu Fei's face, he did not bicker with him, but now, he fiercely remembered it, and when he ascended the throne in the future, perhaps it was because there was no other way, Prince Rui said to him, "The two children quite like 6 daimyi, I'll take the two children to see 6 daimyi ba. Want sincerity. Want sincerity." Since a direct route was not possible, they could only take a roundabout route. Jingwan took Prince Rui's two little Junju to play. Not long after, the two children heard that they were going to be taken to Jin Qin Wang Fu and appeared very happy. Prince Rui's heart was complicated. The two children liked Sixth Aunt, but as parents, they had to use this innocence to achieve their own goals. If it was known, who knew what they would think? Even if they did not know, they were actually living in a lie. Wasn't it another kind of sorrow? At the same time, Prince Rui's feelings towards Jingwan were also very complicated. She envied her similarly carefree days, envied that she did not have to be careful in front of noble consort Su. Even if she angered noble consort Su, she did not have to do anything. She also envied that she was protected and pampered by her husband. However, Jingwan's mouth was similarly unforgiving. Even if Prince Rui stood in her own position and said a few words, she would be unceremoniously retorted back. In this way, it was really somewhat difficult to describe. In fact, the more complicated thing was about the two children. She thought that she had done everything a mother should do. She knew that she could not let the children be too close to the wet nurse, so she often took them by her side. Sometimes she might be a bit strict, but most of the time she was not particularly restrained. These two children were actually not particularly close to her. Because after returning from the palace that time, she tried to take the two children to play, but they were very reserved and even felt disbelief from them. At that time, she actually wanted to cry, but in the end, she held it back. She learned from Jingwan and used all her patience to guide them. Finally, she achieved results. At the beginning, when she heard her daughter say, "Mu Fei actually doesn't know how to do this," she was stiff. Later on, she could calmly say, "Then Jier can teach Mu Fei, okay?" Looking at her daughter's proud face and seriously and intimately, "Teach her," Prince Rui almost cried again. The feeling was completely opposite. In just a few days, she only took a little time to play with them in person every day, but the relationship between the mother and daughter quickly became intimate. It was all because of Luo Jingwan. Without giving an invitation, Prince Rui directly took the two children to the door. The reason was that the two children missed their sixth aunt. Li Hongyuan was unhappy and wanted to send them away directly. Jingwan's eyes were a bit cold, but she did not follow Li Hongyuan's idea in the end. If such little children were rejected at the door, they would definitely think that they were not liked by others. Perhaps it would cause psychological harm. Therefore, Jingwan asked people to welcome them in and prepare the children's favorite things, no matter it was food or toys. Seeing Jingwan, the two children's eyes were bright, but they still pretended to greet Jingwan, "Good morning, sixth aunt." Jingwan did not bring her own emotions to the children. She squatted down and hugged the two little girls. "Oh, you two are really good babies. I like you very much." She also rubbed their foreheads. The two little girls giggled. Seeing this scene, Prince Rui thought that she couldn't do it to this extent. There was a faint sense of guilt in her heart, but she didn't know who it was for. Before she married, she was also naive and unaffected. But after entering Jin Qinhuang Fu for so many years, all her beautiful hopes were shattered. For this and that, she became a schemer. At the same time, she was numb and thought that this life would be like this. She never thought that there would be times when there would be fluctuations. Jingwan got up and pulled the children with each hand. "Third sister-in-law is here. Come and sit." Prince Rui smiled, but that smile was a bit forced. Jingwan's attitude was not cold, and her words were not harsh or sarcastic. She knew that it was because of the two children. Jingwan was not worried about her, but the children. The relationship between adults had a great impact on the children. She deeply felt this when she was in her maternal family. The mother used the children, but the opponent took care of the children with all her heart. How ironic. The place to receive guests was set up in the courtyard. Although the weather was getting colder, the courtyard was still thriving. It seemed to be better than other houses. Seeing the things that Jingwan prepared for the two children, there were no dangerous things to play with. The food was delicious and easy to digest. She put in a lot of effort. Jingwan first played with the two little girls for a while. "Hey, sixth aunt has something to say to your Mufei. You two go play by yourselves first, okay? There are treasures in the courtyard. If you find it, sixth aunt will give it to you, okay?" She then instructed the servants to keep an eye on them and not let them run around too much. In addition, there was no need to restrain them. The two little girls happily went on a treasure hunt. Sixth sister-in-law is considerate. Jingwan still looked at the direction of the two children. Children run and jump, and their bodies are better. And children are hot-tempered, so you don't need to put on clothes too quickly. It could be said that they were totally different. When Prince Rui was about to speak, she turned her head and smiled, but there was no warmth in her eyes. "Whether I am considerate or not, you don't need to tell me. I just have a clear conscience. It's okay to use the children. After all, it's your business. Don't use the children to plot against others and let the children suffer." Although she knew that Jingwan was straightforward, she still felt embarrassed and angry at being exposed. "Sixth sister-in-law, even a vicious tiger will not eat its cubs. How can I do something to hurt my children? That's hard to say. There are even people who strangle their children to achieve some purposes. Third sister-in-law may not do that, but who can guarantee that Prince Rui won't? After all, they are just two girls. For some men, as long as they are useful, they probably won't mind using them in any way." Prince Rui wanted to refute, but she couldn't say a word as if her neck was choked by someone. Because she knew clearly that if such a situation really happened, her husband, the father of the children, would definitely do such a thing. At this time, Prince Rui almost broke down, and tears fell down. "Third sister-in-law, wipe your tears. I don't care if people say that I bullied you, but I'm afraid that the two little commandery princesses will be sad and be in a bad mood if they see it." Jingwan said lightly, looking very indifferent. Prince Rui quickly wiped her tears and forced a smile. "I also know the reason why third sister-in-law came to the Fu today, so there's no need to say more. Of course, third sister-in-law doesn't need to say this to him. Otherwise, that man might say that you're incompetent and a hindrance. Just say that our Prince Rui has a bad temper. He is him, and I am me. If he doesn't calm down, I can't do anything. If he still wants to torment people, I can't be angry with him for an outsider. However, there is one thing that you can tell him. Reconciliation is fine, but prepare 5 million taels of silver. Prince Rui was listening quietly at the beginning, but at the end, she was shocked. Silver. Our prince has no power and can only ask for some worldly things. 5 million taels, it's not a lot, but it's not a small amount. For a prince, it's not a big deal. In fact, Jin Qinhuang Fu doesn't lack money at all. This is something that everyone knows. However, this time, our prince is really angry. If we don't mention any conditions, he definitely won't be able to swallow this anger. Originally, according to our prince's original intention, it's at least 8 million taels, but for Mu Fei's sake, we'll meet. Prince Rui pulled the corner of her mouth. Jingwan had already said it, so she couldn't say, isn't it too much? However, this amount, for Prince Rui Fu, was indeed a bit too much. It wasn't to the extent that they couldn't take it out, but if they did, it would definitely hurt them. How much money did Jin Qinhuang Fu have? Outsiders didn't know. They all said that it was more than the other brothers added together. Most likely, it was true. 5 million taels for Jin Qinhuang Fu might really not be a big deal. However, Jin Qinhuang Fu didn't need to cultivate its own power. No matter how luxurious the entire Fu was, it couldn't be compared to the money that other people needed to invest in their power. Jin Qinhuang Fu didn't understand, so they naturally thought that Prince Rui Fu wouldn't be unable to take out this amount of money. However, they couldn't tell the truth. The world belonged to the one on the dragon throne. Treating it as a sun-cultivating power, in private, they would turn a blind eye to it. But if it was exposed in the open, was it seeking death or seeking death? Moreover, if those things were exposed, it would definitely not be within the tolerance range of the one on the dragon throne. Therefore, they could only grit their teeth and endure. Alright, I'll go back and tell Prince. Jingwan nodded, the proper business is finished. Next, Imperial Saw can be more casual. In Jin Qinhuang Fu, you don't need to be so tense. Not to mention the proper business, in this Jin Qinhuang Fu, even if it was the enemy's territory, it could indeed make people more relaxed. More relaxed than in their own Fu, how laughable, the two young ladies' foreheads were faintly covered with sweat. They came back somewhat dejectedly. Sixth aunt, we didn't find the treasure. You two little girls don't seem to know the value of goods. In your sixth aunt's courtyard, any random flower or plant is a treasure. Therefore, this courtyard is full of treasures. Prince Rui faintly pointed at them and smiled. The two young ladies widened their eyes. Sixth aunt, is it true? Yes. Jingwan smiled and nodded. Although I didn't find it, but sixth aunt can still give each of you a stalk. Go choose it yourself. When you leave, I'll have someone send it back to you. The two young ladies all looked at their Mufei at the same time. Prince Rui nodded. Your sixth aunt's flowers and plants are very good. They can't be asked for outside. Now that there's a chance, you don't need to be polite with her. Then can each of us have 2 stalks? The small one stretched out 2 chubby little fingers. You sly girl, greedy and insatiable. Prince Rui pretended to be angry. Yes, don't listen to your Mufei. It's just 1 more stalk, sixth aunt is happy. She smiled and rubbed the little girl's head. Go choose. The two young ladies didn't understand, but they weren't greedy and didn't ask for the biggest stalk. But because of this, they really did choose something good. Jingwan was happy. The 2 little darlings have good eyes. She went back and called people to prepare. 2 stalks were directly brought in pots and just needed to be moved away. The other two were slightly more troublesome because it wasn't a good season for transplanting, so they couldn't hurt the roots and had to leave a lot of soil. Sixth sister-in-law, you don't need to spoil them like this. How can it be spoiling? You have to keep your word. You can't coax them just because they are children. Prince Rui didn't say anything more. When all the flowers and plants were ready, a servant came to report that Prince Rui came to pick up Prince Rui and the young commandery princess. That's good. I won't keep third royal sister-in-law. Chapter 386. Everyone knew that the so-called fetching people was just an excuse. The purpose was to enter the Wangfu. As a result, Jingwan pushed the boat with the current. If Prince Rui wants to fetch people, then let you purely fetch people and be a pure good man without any utilitarian thoughts. Jingwan said this to Princess Rui with a smile. Princess Rui looked at Jingwan and knew what kind of temperament she had. It was not strange for her to do this kind of thing, but she was afraid that the good man would go mad with anger. Li Hongming, who was outside the gate, was already prepared. As a result, he just watched his wife and children being sent out, and the one who sent them out was not the master of this Wangfu, but only a mama. Jean Wangfu quickly set up another carriage and carried the flowers and trees that were to be given to the two young Junju. Other than the coachman who sat on top and waited, there was no one else. Gong Mama, who was in charge of sending people out, squatted down and then turned around, slowly entering Jean Wangfu. After that, at the entrance of Jean Wangfu, other than the guards guarding the door, there was not even a shadow of a ghost. Then, an inexplicable gust of cold wind blew, which seemed to perfectly reflect Li Hongming's mood. The two children were still very happy and were a little reluctant to part with Jean Wangfu, frequently turning their heads back. Princess Rui did not look at Li Hongming's expression at this time and only quickly sent the children to the carriage that came to Jean Wangfu before, so as to avoid the two children's happy expression provoking their fuang. She let the wet nurse and servant girl follow up to serve. As for herself, of course she had to face Li Hongming. In any case, she was already used to this kind of thing. As long as she did not scare the children, it did not matter. In any case, no matter how different Li Hongming was, in the end, he had never hit her. Li Hongming did not hesitate at all this time and directly got on the carriage, because he was afraid that he would not be able to control himself and explode on the spot. Princess Rui went up and sat down quietly beside Li Hongming. She had never sat beside Li Hongming, let alone being intimate with her husband in the carriage. If she knew the relationship between Jingwan and Li Hongyuan, she would be very surprised. There was no harm without comparison. If other women knew how Li Hongyuan treated Jingwan, they would not be envious, but jealous. He used to be a womanizer, but now he had turned over a new leaf and only took one out of thousands of women. If they had known this would happen, they would not have cared about his bad reputation at all and would have thought of ways to marry him. However, they did not know this. Moreover, they would not have known that Li Hongyuan would only drink from Luo Jingwan. Prince Rui sat upright with his eyes closed. He was calming down his anger. Princess Rui knew. She just thought, what was the use of calming down? When she heard the specific situation later, she would still flip out. She was not a very magnanimous person. Why did she have to act like this? But when she thought of our Prince Rui's image to the outside world, she laughed sarcastically in her heart. Say it. About half an hour later, Li Hongming finally opened his eyes. But there was a storm in his eyes, as if he was going to swallow someone. When Jingwan and Princess Rui talked about business, it was just a few words. Princess Rui simply told Prince Rui. Of course, Princess Rui also knew how to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. Even if Jingwan did not say something, she knew how to separate herself from it. She knew the consequences of telling the truth, but she would say it stupidly. So what if they were husband and wife? There were not many husband and wife in the world who were really one. They were a couple who were united in appearance but divided at heart. They were a complete union of interests. Princess Rui kept her eyes down all the time. Otherwise, the emotions in her eyes would appear. Anyway, she always acted like this, so Li Hongming would not suspect anything. Sure enough, Li Hongming tried to hold himself back, but in the end, he couldn't hold himself back and smashed something in the carriage. Although he didn't roar, the noise was still not small. The few guards outside were shocked at first, but then they looked down and pretended that they didn't know anything. This was also a habit. They were shocked because of the sudden noise. Every time at this time, Princess Rui kept silent. She knew that this matter would involve her, but she still acted as if it had nothing to do with her. In fact, sometimes she felt that she was very strange. Her body was doing something as usual, but her consciousness seemed to fly away from her body and watch coldly from another place. Li Hongming's way of maintaining his image had been deeply ingrained in his bones. Therefore, no matter how angry he was outside, he would subconsciously restrain himself after venting a little. He would not let the matter expand. And the consequence of restraining himself would only be more difficult to control when it exploded. Therefore, when Li Hongming returned to Prince Rui's mansion, his words and actions were the same before he entered the mansion. Except for a little less smile, he still looked elegant. But after he entered, his steps were a little messy and faster. Along the way, the people in the mansion greeted him. No one dared to block his way. However, in such a place like the corridor, the servants were close to the wall and could not be more respectful to him. He walked over without looking sideways and suddenly kicked him. Flog him to death. He only left these two words coldly. He did not know what mistake he had made. Before he could even react, he had been gagged and dragged away. He could not beg for mercy at all. He could only feel fear, and then he died. He probably never thought that he would die without knowing why. Just yesterday, he had been praised and rewarded by the prince. Before he met the prince, he was proud and felt that he was about to be promoted to steward. Others were envious of him. But in the blink of an eye, in the blink of an eye, in the blink of an eye, after that, there were two more similar situations. When the others heard the news, those who could hide immediately hid far away. Those who couldn't hide were all scared out of their wits. They couldn't help but tremble when they paid their respects. They knew that the more they acted like this, the more serious the consequences would be. However, the fear in their hearts couldn't be overcome at all. The maids and manservants kneeling outside the study trembled as they watched Li Hongming stop in front of them. Although all they could see was the hem of his robes and the top of his shoes, they could see the exquisite embroidery on them. But at this moment the embroidery was twisted into a shapeless demon, grinning hideously as if it wanted to devour them. One of the servant girls could not hold on anymore. Her body went soft and she fainted directly. The others were not any better. They wished they could faint. Li Hongming looked down for a moment and sneered. He flicked his sleeves and entered the study. He did not continue to act. Princess Rui, who followed behind, saw that she could not continue to serve him. She waved her hand and let them go. Perhaps because he had decided the lives of several people, Li Hongming regained the feeling of being in control of life and death. He knew that he was not the one who was suppressed and could not move. At this moment, he did not continue to lose his temper and smash things. But the shadow in his eyes could not be removed. Li Hongming sat behind the desk quietly for a whole 2 hours. The others, including Princess Rui, including several aides, close attendants, and secret guard leaders who came later, stood still for 2 hours. Then, Li Hongming finally made a move. Sort out the available money in the mansion. So, in the end, they could only compromise. They did not dare to confront Li Hongyuan directly, and there was no way to make the matter public and fight to the death with him. This was a direct check of the accounts of Prince Rui's mansion, not only in the outer courtyard, but also in the inner courtyard. However, in the situation of Prince Rui's mansion, there were too many places to spend money. It was obvious that the inner courtyard would not allocate too much money. Usually, it would be allocated once every 6 months. Princess Rui had all the power in the inner courtyard, so she was very clear about the situation of the inner courtyard. In a place like a prince's mansion, especially a prince with power and influence, could not be too shabby. In fact, everything in the mansion could not be completely hidden from others. After all, not everything could be provided by their own people. Once it was cut, it would be noticed immediately. 1 or 2 places were fine. But if there were too many places, it would not be long before everyone knew it. At that time, Prince Rui would be laughed at. Therefore, the inner courtyard could not take out much money. Although there were still 2 months' money left, it happened that the new year was just a little more than 2 months away. Everyone knew that once the new year was over, the money spent would at least double. According to the usual practice, some money needed to be transferred from the mansion at that time. Now it was not in the account, but they had to pay out. It was okay for a while, but when the mansion had no money at that time, it would be too embarrassing. At the end of the year, it was originally the time to collect filial piety. But now the largest sum was cut off. In the past, although they spent a lot of money, their income was also quite high. Therefore, Li Hongming did not take money seriously at all. To his subordinates, except for Li Hongyuan, he was probably the most generous. This was the first time he felt so embarrassed. What was more hateful was that the result of sorting out was far from enough. There was still a gap of nearly half. Li Hongming almost flipped the table. But it was useless to flip the table. He had to continue to think of a way. Prince Rui asked Princess Rui to check the property in the mansion again. Then, he took out hundreds of thousands of taels of silver from those things that could not be used. He could not find a compromise to make the rest disappear. But it was still far from enough. There were many properties under the mansion, but it was not the time to collect the debts. In fact, there were not many of them. Under normal circumstances, there could be 200,000 or 300,000 taels of silver. Even if he squeezed them out, the most he could get was 500,000 taels of silver. But once he did that, the business would inevitably be affected and even hurt. But there was no other way at this time. Li Hongming was a very prideful person. He would not easily reach out to outsiders. So, he sat down and killed the goose that laid the golden eggs. Princess Rui was silent. In the end, she took out her dowry, which was 500,000 taels of silver. Li Hongming was gentler to Princess Rui at this time. He promised her that when this matter was over, he would double the compensation. Princess Rui just responded with a few words in a dignified manner. He always felt that this matter might not be settled so easily. In this way, he was still short of 700,000 to 800,000 taels of silver. Li Hongming had no choice but to go to the palace to find imperial concubine Su. On one hand, he wanted his mother to see his sincerity. He also wanted her to see how far her adopted son had forced her to go. On the other hand, he naturally wanted imperial concubine Su to help him. Anyway, his own predicament, his own nature, and all the things that he showed to outsiders in the army could be shown to her. So, Li Hongming was actually calm to the point of being shameless in front of imperial concubine Su. This time, imperial concubine Su was silent for a moment. Then, she said, "The things that old Six helped you erase are not things that can be settled with 500,000 taels of silver. He really only asked for some common things." Anyway, in their opinion, Li Hongyuan definitely asked for the money to vent his anger. There was no other purpose because he did not lack money at all. At this time, imperial concubine Su also did not think of asking her adopted son not to ask for the money. If he said that, then her son's misunderstanding might deepen. So, even if it would cause her son to fall into a difficult situation, she would not ask. After all, it was only money. There would always be a way to get it. Li Hongming did not say anything about imperial concubine Su's attitude. He lowered his eyebrows and restrained his gaze. And, he was already used to this kind of thing. Come find this concubine again tomorrow. For imperial concubine Su to reach her current status, money was not important at all. She had the best food and clothing, but she didn't need to spend her own money. The only place she spent money on was to reward people, but there weren't many people who received her rewards. Therefore, imperial concubine Su actually didn't have much money. What she had was real estate. She was even more poor than Li Hongyuan had expected. In fact, it was not difficult for imperial concubine Su to ask for money. There were many people who wanted to give her filial piety. However, she did not think that she needed it. There was no need for this money to go out of the palace. Now that she suddenly asked for 700,000 to 800,000 taels of silver, it was still a bit tricky. Not long after Prince Rui left the palace, imperial concubine Su asked someone to invite her mother into the palace. The Su family could be said to be prominent. However, there were many people in the imperial court, but none of them sat in high positions. There were no cabinet elders in the cabinet. Out of the 6 ministries, 3 of them wanted people from the Su family. However, the highest position was still the assistant minister. This could be Lu Qingdi's masterpiece. Imperial concubine Su directly asked her mother for money without explaining the reason. The Su family was her maternal family. Although they might have been suppressed a little because of her, the Su family had also developed in many ways because of her. It could be said that the Su family was flourishing. As long as her son ascended the throne, the Su family would definitely immediately become a powerful family in the capital. Even if they did not have any military achievements, it would be natural for them to be conferred a title. Therefore, imperial concubine Su was not embarrassed. However, her mother hesitated. Her face was sorrowful, and her eyes seemed to have cried. Because she was old, her eyes were a little strange. She didn't notice it at first, and it was obvious that there was something she couldn't say. "Mother, what's wrong? Did something happen at home?" Imperial concubine Su frowned slightly. "In fact, even if you didn't summon me, I was going to give you a token to enter the palace to see you. This time, I'm afraid that not only can I not help you, but I may also cause you trouble." Old Lady Su's face was full of guilt. Old Lady Su thought that Old Lady Luo and Old Lady Son of Ding General Manor were relatively mediocre. However, she gave birth to imperial concubine Su. Even if her son was not a talent, others would think that she had gained a lot. The displeasure in imperial concubine Su's eyes flashed away. However, she was her mother after all. Even if she was a little weak and incompetent, imperial concubine Su still had the respect and filial piety that imperial concubine Su should have. "Mother, don't worry. Tell me slowly. If it's not a big problem, I'll let Ming-er deal with it." Imperial concubine Su usually asked for her mother's help first, instead of asking them to find her son. Old Lady Su breathed a sigh of relief, as if she had found her backbone. Mingzhang seemed to be crazy a few days ago. He was obsessed with a prostitute in a brothel and didn't care about his wife and children. He even didn't care about his business. Whenever he had time, he would stay in the brothel and send the most expensive and best things to the brothel. He spent money like running water. What's more, because the prostitute got married, he was schemed against and raised the price wantonly, spending 500,000 taels of silver. Originally, your brother and sister-in-law didn't know about these things, but they found out because of this money. After the investigation, they found that they had spent 200,000 or 300,000 taels of silver. When they found out, Mingzhang became more reckless and even threatened that if the family dared to touch a hair of the prostitute, he would hang himself at home directly. Speaking of this, old lady Su couldn't help wiping her tears. Su Mingzhang was the eldest son of imperial concubine Su's brother. He was a few years older than Li Hongming. His eldest son was already 11 or 12 years old. He was a steady person and was also good at dealing with officials. Imperial concubine Su valued him very much. He was the assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue, which was even higher than his father's position. He could be said to be the pillar of the Su family. It was not surprising that he could hide so much money from his family. However, such a thing happened to the most favored one in her mother's family. It could be imagined how dark imperial concubine Su's face was. What about Mingzhang's wife? This definitely didn't happen in a day or two. It's impossible that she didn't notice. Why didn't she say anything? Speaking of which, this is the most infuriating thing. Mingzhang actually plotted against his father-in-law and two brothers-in-law early on and made them take the blame for the lawsuit. This time, he held on to his wife and the matter was exposed. When his wife told this matter, she almost cried to death. Imperial concubine Su's hand that was holding the cup had already turned white. If she had used that much strength, the cup might have already broken. Since that evil creature likes her so much, he could just redeem her and keep her at home. 100,000 taels of silver would be the most expensive. Why did he have to make such a scene outside? Did water get into his brain? Our understanding is that the prostitute didn't want to be redeemed no matter what. There's no way to know the reason. Her attitude towards Mingzhang wasn't very good, but Mingzhang pampered and coaxed her like a precious treasure. He didn't want her to suffer the slightest bit of grievance. Imperial concubine Su only felt her vision go dark. If that nephew of hers wanted to hide it, it wasn't strange that there hadn't been any rumors until now. Moreover, if this matter was set up by someone, they would naturally help him hide it and expose it when the time was right. If that's all, it shouldn't be too serious. Is there anything else? Tell me all at once. Old Madame Su cried before speaking. After a while, she calmed down and said, "It's a little special during this period of time," so she restrained her identity. But today, I don't know why she went to the brothel early in the morning. Then she saw a naked man hugging the prostitute and sleeping soundly on the bed. She lost her mind for a while, and then someone died. Fortunately, it was still early at that time and no one else got up. The two servants who went with her went to the brothel first and then returned home to report. The situation was temporarily under control and didn't make a fuss. However, although the dead man didn't have a good background, his father was an official after all. After a long time, this matter couldn't be hidden. Imperial concubine Su had never been so angry. It was obvious that she had been schemed against. What's wrong with Su Mingzhang's brain? It's fine that he got into it so easily, but why did he fall in so deep? If that person was in front of her, she would definitely slap him to death. Imperial concubine, in fact, you can't blame Mingzhang for this matter. It's just that the prostitute looks exactly the same as that person back then. Imperial concubine Su was stunned and then realized who her mother was talking about. Her face became even worse. It was also a very melodramatic matter. When Su Mingzhang was 15 or 16 years old, a distant relative came to the capital and lived in the Su mansion. Then, the girl of that family fell in love with the eldest grandson of the Su mansion at first sight. However, the girl's status was too low. Then, the Su family must have broken up the couple and sent the girl far away without mercy. Even if the girl was pregnant at that time and was ruthlessly aborted, the Su family refused to give her the status of a concubine. It was just because Su Mingzhang was discussing the marriage at that time. The girl was of noble birth, so obviously, such a thing absolutely could not be done. And all of this was behind Su Mingzhang's back. When he found out about the situation, the Su family told him that the girl was already dead and told him not to think about her anymore. The youth's first awakening of love was originally beautiful, but it was forcefully destroyed. Originally, perhaps he hadn't reached the point where he couldn't separate from the other party. However, when this rebellious thought arose, it became a cinnabar at the tip of his heart that he couldn't bear to part with. The marriage that was about to be completed was ruined by him. After 2 or 3 years, he began to mature and this matter seemed to have passed just like that. Then, he married a girl of relatively low status. After that, he lived his life step by step. Who knew, mother, how did you know that the prostitute looked the same as the one back then? Mingzhang had always been raising her and wasn't willing to force her. Who knew that she dared to take on another guest? In a fit of rage, Mingzhang took her back. Mingzhang was tormenting her with all his might, but he didn't allow us to get close. Although he took action, he didn't have the slightest intention of punishing that girl. From the time of the incident until now, Mingzhang hasn't left her side at all. He didn't even consider killing her. He ignored his family's worries and questioned that prostitute like a madman as to why she betrayed him. If we weren't sure that it was Mingzhang, we would have thought that it was a different person. It's really too strange. Imperial Consort Su rubbed the space between her eyebrows. These matters were really piled up one after another. She thought that they would be able to take advantage of the Empress's fall and win. As expected, she couldn't let her guard down at any time. However, when this incident happened, it should have been before the Empress fell ill, so there was some uncertainty about who was behind it. Imperial Consort Su had no choice but to let Li Hongming handle this matter. Li Hongming didn't expect that he would be called by Imperial Consort Su before lunchtime. Li Hongming knew that Imperial Consort Su wouldn't look for him if there wasn't something urgent. Thus, he put down the matter at hand and hurriedly entered the palace from the Ministry of Personnel. He also thought that he was a prince and only had a nominal position in the Ministry of Personnel. If it was anyone else, they would have dared to act so casually. They would have been cleaned out in a matter of minutes and then quickly returned to take care of their child. When Li Hongming arrived at the Jade Essence Palace, his grandmother still hadn't left. After hearing the whole story, his mood could be said to be even worse than Imperial Consort Su's. It was only because his grandmother was present that he didn't show it. However, the gloominess in his eyes seemed to solidify. Ming, you should know the seriousness of this matter. He knew, how could he not know? It was because he knew that his mood was so bad right now. The Ministry of Revenue was a money bag. Its importance was second only to the Ministry of Personnel. In the Ministry of Revenue, he naturally didn't have only one cousin, Su Mingzhang. However, Su Mingzhang was the person he trusted the most because their interests were absolutely the same. If Su Mingzhang fell, then he might lose the right to speak in the Ministry of Revenue. What kind of blow would that be? Thus, at this moment, he actually wished that Su Mingzhang would immediately die. He still had to help him settle this matter. Imperial Mother, don't worry. Son understands. This matter is no small matter. If someone is scheming behind the scenes, the moment you make a move, the person behind the scenes may immediately drag you down. Thus, you must be careful. It's best if you can pry open that prostitute's mouth first, then verify her words before taking any further action. Do you hear me? When it came to understanding this son of hers, no one would dare to say that she was second. She knew that he was in a fit of anger and was worried that he would be swayed by his emotions. Li Hongming's heart trembled and he exhaled. Just now, he really was a bit irrational. Imperial Mother, don't worry. Son will be careful. That's for the best. You should know that since things have already happened, they must be resolved one by one. Especially at this time, the more you can't be chaotic, because if there's even the slightest mistake, it's possible that someone will take advantage of it. The current situation is becoming more and more unclear. One wrong step may lead to eternal damnation. There are some things that can only be won, not lost. If you lose your life. Your mood has been unstable recently. I hope that you can properly reflect on yourself and not follow in Li Hongyi's footsteps. If it really doesn't work, I will ask your father to temporarily suspend your work and go back to the mansion to be quiet for a while. Imperial Mother, you can't. Li Hongming met noble consort Su's eyes, which were a little disappointed. Li Hongming immediately realized that he had made the same mistake that his mother had just pointed out. Imperial Mother, please give me some more time. If I can't adjust, I will ask my father to dismiss me. It's best that you can think clearly. Well, your grandmother's legs are not nimble. Send her out of the palace for me and do more filial piety for me. As for other things, I will think of a way. I know. When Li Hongming turned to old lady Su, the negative emotions were no longer visible and could not be detected. It was unknown whether it was perfectly concealed or had disappeared. With a gentle smile, he said, Grandmother, I will send you back now. Don't worry, I will take care of my cousin's affairs. Old lady Su finally showed a little smile. Thank you, Your Highness. As for what she had just heard, she was confused for a moment and then put it aside. Grandmother, we are a family. As a cousin, I am duty-bound to take care of my cousin's affairs. Well, I am relieved with you here. After the two left, noble consort Su first breathed a sigh of relief, and then frowned. If she couldn't get through the Su family, she could only go to the Shen family. This kind of thing, if not done well, would cause a big problem. Therefore, it was better not to ask for help from people whom she couldn't absolutely trust. And the only people she absolutely trusted were the Shen family and the Su family. However, she knew very well that the wife of the head of the Shen family, her cousin-in-law, actually didn't like her very much. It was only because her cousin, Shen Shuhan, did his best for her. She and Shen Shuhan actually had a hazy and ambiguous relationship, but she had completely cut it off later. However, she still kept Shen Shuhan hanging, making him unswervingly loyal to her so that she could better pave the way for her son. At a certain age, she was no longer as impulsive as before. Her feelings for her cousin had been completely restrained. However, many years of care had been engraved in her bones. Moreover, the binding of interests made the Shen family unable to betray her. Others didn't know this kind of thing, but as the person who shared the same bed, how could she not know? Therefore, it was normal that her cousin-in-law didn't like her. If there were other choices, she didn't want to face her cousin-in-law, especially when she needed her help. However, she had no choice now. She believed that if she asked, the other party would definitely give in. It was just a matter of face. When Li Hongming arrived at the Su family was respectful to him. After all, they were counting on Li Hongming now. Li Hongming talked to the Su family warmly. His words were quite beautiful, which made the Su family feel very comfortable. Li Hongming did a good job of face, making the Su family more dedicated to him. It could be said that he also flattered the Su family. And all of this was just a matter of a few words. It could be seen that sometimes, the effect of a glib tongue was quite big. Li Hongming went to see Su Mingzhang. Sure enough, his whole person was like a madman. He was completely unlike the mature and steady person he used to be. Li Hongming found it hard to imagine that a mature and rational man would actually become like this for a woman. He was now a little curious. What kind of outstanding beauty was this woman? If Li Hongming wanted to see someone, naturally no one could stop him. Even Su Mingzhang couldn't. The Su family might have some misgivings about Su Mingzhang. Li Hongming just waved his hand and the guards directly went up and held him down. In the end, he was just a weak scholar. How could he be a match for the strong and well-trained guards? Soon, Li Hongming saw the person he wanted to see. However, he didn't achieve his goal because the woman's appearance couldn't be seen normally. Her whole face was crimson red, and the skin on many parts of her body was broken, including her neck and hands. Almost all the skin that was exposed was like this. Let alone being beautiful, this appearance was terrifying no matter how one looked at it. Why does she look like this? The servant girl trembled. Yes, it was Master who washed her. He washed her again and again. The water at the back was very hot. Li Hongming understood. Because he liked her so much, he couldn't bear to kill her. However, he also disliked her for being too dirty. With this kind of torment, this woman wouldn't live for long. Li Hongming had someone bring a chair and sat across from the woman. This prince sees that you're not saying anything. There's no expression. Does it not hurt? The woman still sat there woodenly. Her eyes didn't even move. Li Hongming didn't get angry. How about this, you tell me everything. This prince will give you a quick death. How about it? The woman's eyes finally moved. She really didn't look like someone who had any desire to live. But Su Mingzhang, who was being held down by the guards, had an even bigger reaction. His eyes were red, like an enraged beast. Li Hongming didn't care about his expression. Cousin, I know you're sober now. Don't play dumb with me. Think about it carefully. You've already wasted more than half of the Su family's money. You might cause the Su family to be in a difficult situation for a long time. You'll be ridiculed and humiliated by others. It's fine if you lose your dignity, but cousin also wants to throw away your reputation and life. A white-haired person sending off a black-haired person. In the entire capital, cousin can be considered the model of a filial son. Is this how you fulfill your filial piety? Then, after you die, the Su family's reputation will be tarnished. The Su family's men won't have a future to speak of. The Su family's women won't have good in-laws. How much should they hate you? You're simply the sinner of the Su family. And all of this is because of this woman who doesn't even put you in her eyes. Are you sure it's worth it? Su Mingzhang gradually stopped struggling. His face was dejected, looking more like a stray dog. Li Hongming turned to the woman again. Have you thought it through? Are you going to say it or not? You have to know that when the time comes to torture you, I'm afraid you'll be worse off than dead. The woman first sneered, then laughed crazily. She even burst into tears. Many people felt goosebumps all over their bodies. Coupled with that honor, there was an inexplicable fear. Li Hongming wasn't in a hurry. He sat there leisurely and even had the mood to drink tea and eat something. He looked like he had a card up his sleeve. The laughter came to an abrupt end. What I know. Your Highness, do you think I was sent by someone else? I have to say, Your Highness, you're really thinking too much. I'm just a lowly person who wants revenge. She pointed to her face. When I was born, I looked like my mother. The more I grew, the more I looked like my mother. It's like I was carved from the same mold. But does Your Highness know what kind of life I've lived since I was a child? Because before my mother got married, she lost her virginity and had a child. Before her body was clean, she was abused. She couldn't die but couldn't. But in this kind of situation, she was still able to give birth to me. And my birth was simply a plaything. Do you know what it's like to be abused at a young age and lose your virginity? Perhaps it's because I was too young and didn't know anything, so I didn't go crazy. Should I be lucky or unlucky? Do you know how much my mother hated? Do you know how much I hated? Everything my mother had was brought to her by the Sioux family, and I'm just an extension of my mother's misfortune. I slept with those hoodlums and asked them to help me kill that family. Then, I became the daughter of one of their elders and used my body to serve them well. Then, I had them sell me for money. I knew that my biggest enemy was in the capital. My mother told me in detail. Do you know how hard it was for me to get to the capital? But thinking about it, compared to before, those days were actually pretty good. But in the end, I was still a little small. Unless it was a good person with a special hobby, no one would like that kind of bean sprout. But my luck was so good. Those people actually had a secret medicine that could make people grow quickly. To have my current appearance at the age of 13, isn't it very good? As she spoke, she stuck out her chest. With a strange smile on her face, that scene, the Sioux family's expressions weren't very good, especially those who were involved in this matter. And the one with the biggest reaction was naturally Su Mingjiang. Liar, the first night you were with me, you clearly bled. TSK, my mother was so miserable, but what you care the most is actually this. You're really the same as men. I didn't pay much attention to the bleeding, but I actually managed to fool you. With this body of mine, I've slept with many people, including that ugly and dirty beggar. She said all this now, knowing that it was to disgust people, but whether it was true or not, it still remained to be seen. I originally thought that revenge would be quite difficult, but I didn't expect it to be so easy. Just casually set up a trap, and you're even more impulsive than that teenage girl. However, the Sioux family is the family of a prince with power and influence. Wanting to kill you and make you accompany my mother, I'm afraid it's not very possible. The woman twirled her hair in circles. That's all. Next, it's up to Prince's ability. I don't know if Prince can completely clean up this matter. If you can't. Dragging Prince down with me, I've made a big profit. Li Hongming nodded calmly and ordered the woman to be taken away. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.